From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here on Wednesday. Good show on tap for you. I hope you join in the conversation. You can just ask a general question if you're interested, or more likely, you may have a case you want to bring up to us. We're going to talk this morning about medical malpractice, as we do every month with our guest, one of the best malpractice attorneys in the entire state. That would be Clint Kelly. We're lucky enough to have him here in Middle Tennessee. How are you, sir?
Morning. I wonder if I'm the only person who lost some sleep last night watching the Predators game.
I think I'm a little punchy today as well. We had some people here at the station that worked the overnights that went to the game. I think they just came straight over after. What'd you think?
Exciting.
How about that?
That's a dangerous team, I think, and most dangerous in the playoffs.
Yeah, they're number 8 seed, Clint.
I know.
And they're just rolling through it. In case you've just joined us and you're not paying attention, they won last night. So they're up 3-1.
Yeah, it reminds me, Nick, of the 1999 Titans. Remember the ones that went to the Super Bowl? There's something magic about this team.
Yeah.
You just feel it when you watch it.
It just clicks, and the goalie's playing so well and all that. Anyway, we're all a little punchy, but it's a good punchy because we didn't get a lot of sleep, but we're invigorated, and we can take your calls.
I don't mind staying up late if they win.
Yeah, exactly. If you stayed up and they had lost in overtime, like, oh, what did I do that for? Right. Bummer. No such problem. So what we're going to do is open up the phone lines here in a moment, but we'll kind of lay it out for you like we always do and give you an idea of what is a malpractice case, Clint, and how, whether or not you know or think maybe you should check if you have a case. What do you think? Yes, I always like to lay this out for our viewers at the top.
Two easiest things to ask yourself is, has there been a major medical mistake that led to a major medical injury? If you have those two things, then you may have a medical malpractice case.
Now, layman like me, how do you know whether it's a mistake or not? I mean, a lot of people have negative results from a visit to a doctor, and they're not miracle workers. Sometimes they do the best they can and it doesn't work. That's not a case, right?
Right. I mean, what you'll know is if someone loses a limb to an infection that doesn't seem to have been managed properly, if someone goes into surgery and comes out with a major complication that's not being explained very well, patient gets a drug they weren't supposed to get. I mean, typically, the family member or the patient knows something went wrong. I mean, it's apparent.
Yeah.
But if there is a question, that's when you call somebody like me, and I'll have a review done on the case, and I can make a determination on my own whether or not legally that mistake is compensable.
All right, you can call in here and we can talk about it. And I know Clint has actually had cases that have moved forward that have come from this very show. And the key to, and the thing that always stuck with me is, all right, when you determine whether there's a mistake and how you have a case against a doctor, it's standard of care. There's a baseline of what is expected for any procedure, right?
That's exactly right.
So you look at it, okay, there was a negative effect here. The patient's contacted me and said he thinks or she thinks something's wrong. So you look at it and you're trying to determine, did the doctors do everything up to snuff as other doctors would, right?
That's the test. And you mentioned about a bad outcome. A bad outcome can happen even if the healthcare provider is doing everything that that person should do under the circumstances.
Okay, right.
It's when the bad outcome results from the healthcare provider providing less than that standard of basic care or breaking a rule in the healthcare profession that's designed to prevent that complication. When that happens, then there's a case.
Okay, and I've done stories with Clint on a number of very interesting cases. It can run the gamut, okay? We did the case with the woman who was given the wrong prescription. Correct. An antipsychotic drug when she was supposed to get muscle relaxers, and it really messed with her head.
Right.
Okay, that's a case, right?
Exactly.
Because some standard was not followed to make sure she got the right pills. We have a case where a very high-profile case where the woman had an infant, newborn. They did surgery on the wrong baby.
Right, and that's a different situation. It's called a medical battery, and you're not having to prove that there was a departure from the standard of care. I mean, that's one of those things that's it's obvious. I mean, you have to operate on the right child. You have to operate on the right body part. If you don't, as a healthcare provider, then you're going to be liable.
Okay, so there are cases and then there are cases. That's one, as you said, it's pretty clear cut as it went down. It's just a matter of what kind of settlement's going to come out of it. But how will hospitals or doctors fight back against you in closer cases? What will they argue? How do they go about doing it? I'm just talking general, Clint, you know.
It depends on the case, and what I mean by that is what kind of case are we looking at? If we're looking at a case where it seems obvious that the doctor or the healthcare provider did something wrong, right, then they will push back on two things. Either they'll say that the mistake didn't actually cause the injury, something else did, some other pre-existing condition, or maybe someone else's conduct. And they'll also fight back on damages. They'll say, look, we hurt you, but we didn't hurt you as bad as you say you were hurt. And so there's a debate over what the value of the claim is. I call it dollarizing the claim. What is the value of that claim? And that's where a battle usually takes place.
Well, you've said yourself, you've had cases come through the door that are cases of malpractice, but because the level of harm to the patient didn't reach a certain threshold, you couldn't collect many damages, you couldn't take the case.
That's the toughest situation I have, Nick, is when someone comes in and I know there's been a negligent act, I know that it caused an injury, but financially I can't take the case, and neither can any of my colleagues, because the value of the case equals the amount that you would spend trying to get the money.
Yeah, and we should say he only gets paid if he wins.
Correct.
Okay, so you have to be kind of picky. You wish you could take them all, I know that, and to get justice for these folks. But
sure,
you have to pay the bills.
If it were like a workers' comp system, I could take so many more cases, Nick, and be able to get people compensation, because then you wouldn't have to prove fault. You would just prove, you know, whether the injury was caused by the conduct and what the value is. But under the system that we have right now, I have to prove that there's negligence and that negligence caused the injury. And with that being the case, I can spend $50, $60, $100,000 of my own money getting the case to trial. And because of that, I have to be very careful to make sure the case is, the damages are worthwhile to be able to pursue it.
All right, we're going to take calls here. Maybe we'll squeeze one in before we go to the break. But the lines are open and the calls are coming in, 737-7587. But one thing we talked about when you sat down, and as I said, malpractice can maybe take many different forms. There are situations in some area hospitals here, in fact, where you go to the emergency room and you can have a long wait. And sometimes once you even get checked in, you're not even given a room because they're so crowded. You're in the hallway on a stretcher somewhere. And you know, I'm not saying that maybe they don't have a choice on that. Where does that maybe come to a threshold of malpractice? How long should you expect to have to wait in an emergency room?
All right. There are standards in terms of how long a emergency physician should allow, or emergency room nurse should allow a patient to wait before being seen initially and then being treated. We call it a triaging, which is, you know, if anybody ever watches MASH, you look at the patients, you decide who's the worst, and whoever's worst gets treated first, and whoever's the least harmed is the one that usually gets the last treatment. The problem is, and you and I talked about this off air, in some cases, in some hospitals, patients are being left out in the hallway of the emergency room for hours upon hours before they actually get their treatment. And if that patient is improperly triaged, if their acuity, or let's just call it their danger level, is in the red line and they were misevaluated, they could be seriously injured or actually die out there in the hallway waiting for treatment. There's no excuse for that. And I don't care whether the hospital lacks proper facilities to be able to bring everybody into a room. If the hospital can't handle the patient load, you refer the patient to a hospital that can.
Yeah. Send them some. Do you think part of the problem there is what we see in this day and age, so many folks going to emergency for everything from a head cold to something? I mean, is that one reason they're so overcrowded? Do you have any idea?
I do. I think that's one of the issues why we have a segment of the population that goes to the emergency room anytime something happens to them.
Yeah.
One of the goals of Obamacare was to insure more of those people so that they would get treatment in other places other than the emergency room. Because we did not expand Medicaid here in Tennessee, we still have a substantial number of what I would consider to be impoverished people. The only way they can get treatment is to go to the emergency room.
Yeah, and that's the most expensive place to go.
That's correct. And so, and if this health care bill in Congress passes, even more people are going to be uninsured and going to be forced to go to the emergency room, and that's a poor allocation of health care resources.
If you're lucky, you have not been to an emergency room lately, but if you have, you know what we're talking about. I mean, I've been, unfortunately, and there it's packed, and you're like, gosh, who are all these sick people? And he's right, they triage. And it so happened I went in one day when it was fairly crowded, but I was having anaphylactic shock from a bee sting. Talk about something they take you right back for. Immediately, I went right around. I would have rather sat and wait and not be close to death, but they took me back there. I got the EpiPen and I was much better, but it's crowded these days, and it's a very good point you make. Hospitals need to accommodate you.
Yeah, and there are people who will go to the emergency room who have no insurance, and they'll go there because they think maybe they're having pneumonia when they're actually having a bad cold or bronchitis.
Right.
Those people don't need to be in the emergency room. They need to be elsewhere. So if you go in there, you shouldn't have to compete with someone with bronchitis to get care, which again harkens back to the public policy issue. Which we need more people insured, whether it's publicly or through private health insurance to prevent emergency rooms from being overcrowded.
I agree. Listen, we'll take a break. When we come back, the phone lines are open, 737-7587. One thing we didn't touch on that we will, if you suspect, even if you just think maybe there was something that went wrong, you need to make the call, and this is your chance this morning because there is a statute of limitations on malpractice cases. Joe, Laura, Ramona, and others, stay there. We'll get to your phone calls with Clint Kelly right after this.